Thanks everyone for attending this Wednesday walkthrough. We're going to take you through the Corda Quickstart experience on Kaleido. Let me start by just saying that I sincerely hope everyone is staying safe and staying healthy during these really tumultuous and scary times. So we at Kaleido extend our best wishes to all of you wherever you are in the world. I have a few quick slides that we're going to go through. Just to give you kind of some high-level information about Kaleido, and then we'll dive directly into the product and take you through the experience. Feel free to use the Q&A, use the chat feature, raise your hand. We like these to be as interactive as possible, and I believe we have a few of our engineers on the call as well. So if there are any low-level technical questions about signing or about PKI identity, port mapping, etc. I'll do my best to answer, and if it's a curveball for me, one of those guys can go ahead and hop in and take that. So without further ado, let me share these few slides and then we'll go ahead and get going. So Kaleido at a very high level is defined by three core tenets, built for modern business networks, so very much use case industry agnostic, completely applicable to healthcare, to insurance, to finance. The building blocks and the functionality on the platform are there for you to leverage and build out your own custom enterprise grade solution. The platform itself, as you'll see here very shortly, is radically simple. So all admin operations, all services, and all interactions, there's a clean REST API under the covers, so you can very easily do your own scripting, write your own cron jobs, build out your own admin dashboards, and easily white label solutions on top of Kaleido. And then lastly, very much built for the enterprise. And I have a slide touching on a lot of the features that you just get out of the box for free as first-class citizens on Kaleido. Our approach with sort of the adoption of the technology and this journey from pilot to MVP into production is to really try to flatten that curve for folks. So whether it's an enterprise, whether it's a startup, whether it's a mid-tier business, we want to make it very, very easy to just adopt the core functionality, not concern yourself with hosting runtimes, with low-level P2P messaging, with cryptography, and give you the confidence to transition into a pilot phase with decentralized ownership of the network, with shared IT, and then ultimately have the confidence to run this in production with high levels of throughput, with broad decentralized participation and running your transactions at scale. So a quick snapshot of the very diverse customers that are running today in production on Kaleido, and we can see that this does span a lot of different industries and verticals, going all the way from finance to energy majors to retail and entertainment, NGOs, and governmental agencies as well. A few quick touch points on the enterprise grade nature of Kaleido. All of this is stuff that you do get out of the box. ISO certification, really flexible key management techniques, enterprise identity underpinned with X509s and digital certificates, SLAs, 24/7 support, and then best of breed node clients and consensus algorithms as well. Last thing I'll touch on before we hop into the demo is Kaleido is a basic SaaS. So there's the standard pay-as-you-go model where you're billed for hourly runtimes of core components. But we also work with customers and try to accommodate the stage of the journey that they're on. So we create multiple packages and bespoke pricing models to help you really accelerate from that pilot, from that proof of concept into production and build out something that has quantifiable value for your industry and for your company. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump into the product now. If you go to docs.kaleido.io, you'll see a few new quick start guides that have been created here. What I'm going to do with you guys today is I'm pretty much just going to go step by step through the deploy your first Corda app quick start guide here. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to leverage this Kaleido Corda samples gallery, public-facing GitHub repo. And this is going to allow us to build an RPC client to send our application requests in from. And it's also going to supply us with the actual jar files, our contract file and our flow file. So you guys will, if you do want to follow along in real time, just go ahead and go to the docs right here and go ahead and hop over to this repo, and it'll give you all the JDK and Gradle dependencies, and then those pertinent, client drivers and business logic files as well. Okay, so inside of Kaleido, the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and create our network. This is the namespace for the organizations, your business network, the folks that are going to be participating in this blockchain. So I'll just call mine example network. Click next. We're going to set a home region, and this is going to be the cloud provider and the underlying data center where our pods and our containers and our resources are going to be hosted and fully managed by Kaleido. So we see that we have choices, across AWS and Azure, and you can ultimately turn this into a cross-cloud and a cross-region environment. So all of that layer 2 virtual networking and tunneling is done behind the scenes by Kaleido. So you can have a very diverse, very decentralized business network here. I'm just going to go with AWS for this demo, keep it simple. Go ahead and click finish. And we've created the namespace for our business network. If we click on this governance tab, we see here that my organization has provisioned the first membership inside of the network. Now, one useful technique that Kaleido makes it very, very easy to do is create multiple memberships and actually mock out the future participation of a decentralized network. So you can create mock memberships for different financial institutions, different trading partners, different insurance companies, etc. There's also circumstances where potentially you might want to proxy operate a node on behalf of an organization. So this technique would be applicable to that as well. So I'm just going to create another one called Organization XYZ. And what we'll ultimately do is we'll create 2 nodes and we'll go through that basic IOU lender borrower scenario with Corda. So we'll have a node for ABC and we'll have a node for XYZ. This guy will be the lender, this guy will be the borrower. And in the end, when we actually run through the Corda app, each of them will be able to sign that transaction, send it to the notary, it'll get returned, and they can put it in their private state vaults. Okay, so still at the business network. Now what we want to do is we want to get into the blockchain layer. And the nomenclature for that in Kaleido is environment. So we're going to click add an environment here. And we see that there's 2 doors that we can go through. We can go through the classic Ethereum door, and this is where Kaleido provides you with Geth and Quorum and Hyperledger Besu and those accompanying consensus algorithms. We've done this a lot in the past, and today is not about Ethereum. Today is about Corda on Kaleido. So we're going to click on the Corda door here, go ahead and click next, and now we're going to create a name for our environment. Now, within your business network, this probably goes without saying, but I'll touch on it. You can have multiple environments. So you can follow your same DevOps pipelines and have a dev, have a stage, have a UAT, and ultimately have a production environment. And Kaleido has techniques that make it very, very easy to iterate and promote your source code and your business logic throughout your network. So I'll create one called dev here. It's obviously going to be an AWS US East. That's the only cloud provider and region that we've whitelisted. And we're going to go ahead and choose Corda OS. And we'll do a manage non-validating notary. We're going to get this for free out of the box. Actually, our system monitor inside of Kaleido is going to serve as the notary in this circumstance. So we'll click finish. And now we want to go ahead and bring this guy to life by creating some Corda nodes. And like I said, I'm going to create one apiece, one for my ABC membership and one for my XYZ membership. So first we'll attribute this guy to ABC, call him node number 1, leave him in AWS in Ohio, click next. I'm not going to touch on this ad nauseum today, but we do have a lot of available cloud integrations for heightened key protections, for backups, for redundancy and business continuity, log streams, private traffic and networking, etc. If you're interested in those, we can talk about it offline, or you can dig into the docs. Last, we'll choose the footprint size for our node. I'm actually running on the free starter plan right now, what everyone else can do that's on the call, and you'll see that small is the only size available for you. So we'll go ahead and click finish, and this guy will take 25 to 30 seconds for that pod and all the containers to come up and fully initialize. Now I'm going to create a second node right here called node number 2, and we're going to apply this guy to the XYZ membership. And I'm just going to hopscotch through all these features again, next, leave it as a small node, go ahead and click finish. Now we can hop back to the dashboard piece, the dashboard tile inside of our environment, and we can see the status of all of our resources. And in real time here, what we'll notice is we'll see these change from an initializing to a joining to a started state. Once they're green and once they're started, we can go ahead and proceed with the next step. So I'll pause here for a second. So what we're going to do as these guys come up and as they fully initialize is we're going to go ahead and upload our business logic. We're going to need to upload some jar files that have our IOU contract and then a file that has the flow, that has the definition of that business logic. We need these guys to fully initialize, though, before we can successfully upload that business logic. Because when we upload it to Kaleido, we need to promote it into the runtime of our Corda nodes, and then we need to restart the node. We need to reinitialize that runtime so it can properly load those core dApps and so that it can re-enter its P2P messaging loop. So you'll notice inside of the docs, this is a really critical step where you need to exercise some patience. We need to let these nodes fully initialize and reach this state of running P2P messaging loop. They need to discover that notary, and they need to discover, the counterparts that are inside of the network. And this takes a couple minutes. So this is the time for a bathroom break, or this is the time to go get coffee. Or if you guys really like looking at the Corda logs and you want to see, the fun pun that they've created, for each of the runtimes. Here's one. If at first you don't succeed, destroy all the evidence that you tried. There's always a clever one hiding inside of all the logs. But we do need to be patient here, and we do need to let this node fully initialize and make sure that at the end, our trailing log says entered or running P2P messaging loop, whatever that nomenclature is here, running P2P messaging loop. So I'm going to drag my feet here, and we're going to let this guy get into a happy state. Then we're going to check on node number 2. And when those guys are good to go, we're going to go ahead and upload our source code, our jar files. We're going to go ahead and promote those jar files, and then we'll restart the nodes. And again, those business logic jar files, those are retrievable and buildable here in this publicly facing Kaleido GitHub repository, which is the first prerequisite in the Quick Start guide. So don't skip this step. If you don't have the client driver and you don't have your jar files, you're not going to get very far. So this guy's humming along. He should be good to go in 15 to 20 seconds here. So we'll let him get to his happy space, and then we'll check on node number 2 as well. So this guy's in a happy place right here, node number 2. Now let's check back on node number 1. And he's also running his P2P messaging loop. Okay, thanks for your patience. Now we can get on to the actual fun stuff. So here we are on node number 1, and we're going to use this contract management feature that Kaleido gives you out of the box. We're going to click Add Core dApp here. So what we're going to start with is creating a new contract project. We're going to create a new namespace, and the key value pairs, or the children, or the business logic, our contract and our flow file, those are going to live inside this namespace. So I'm going to create a new one called IOU. And now I'm going to select my first file. I'm going to go ahead and grab that business logic file, the contract. So going to my clone of that GitHub repository, I can go into IOU contract, I can go into the build, I can go into the libs, and I can grab that first jar right here, the contract jar. So go ahead and upload that, click finish. This will just take a few seconds to do this. And now we can iterate outside of that contract project and go ahead and add our flow file as well. So we'll drop down to our IOU contract project. We'll select our second file. And what you'll notice here is that this is also going to teach our second node about the business logic. We don't have to exchange this out of band. We don't need to share source code offline or have all of this, one-off uploading of source code. And Kaleido makes it very easy for your collective business network to share these critical assets and to have knowledge about, what you're going to be running on chain, the critical business logic. So here's the flow file. Go ahead and upload that. Click finish. And now we can use the Core dApp management feature on node number 1, and we'll see that we have 2 jar files hanging out in the staging bucket of the node. And as I said a few minutes ago, what we need to do is we need to promote these to a live state, and then we need to restart the node so that our Corda nodes can load those jar files and re-enter those P2P messaging loops. So I'm going to promote both of these to live, and now we're going to restart the runtime for node number 1. Go ahead and confirm that. And now this is an important step as well. You need to do the same thing for node number 2. Node number 2 is going to need to sign this borrowing lending transaction right here. And in order to properly do so, he's going to need those jar files as well. So perform those exact same steps on node number 2, upload to live, and restart that runtime. And while these guys are restarting, don't worry, we're not going to have to sit and wait for the logs and look at logs anymore. We can do some of the other lifting that we need in order to securely communicate with our Corda nodes once these guys are up and running. So I'm going to go back to node number 1. And the next critical piece that we need is we need a network bridge. We need a tunneler that's going to be able to securely communicate via TCP with our Corda node, right? That that RPC endpoint is not exposed to the public internet. So we need some tunneling device, we need some bridge client. And this is gonna be a two-way client here, basically. So we're gonna create this private network bridge on Kaleido. This will be our server-side component. And then we're gonna download a binary so that we have our client-side component that can communicate with this guy. And then ultimately what we do when we run our application, we'll have an RPC client that can communicate with our local bridge client, which then communicates with our server-side bridge client and ultimately communicates with our Corda node. If there are specific questions on that, I encourage you to chuck them into the chat, and I'll give one of our engineers the privilege of explaining more kind of on the nuances and on the low-level networking details of that. So first step, create the network bridge on Kaleido. So we're gonna let this be owned by ABC, and I'll just call this Kaleido bridge server. This is the server component. So go ahead and finish that. And this is actually a Kaleido service. So this is pods and containers, and these will take 30 to 45 seconds to come up. And then we'll be able to download some JSON, some configuration information that's gonna teach our local client how to communicate with this process, with this service on Kaleido. So this is a very, very critical step here. And again, just to go back through the flow, essentially, we're gonna have three distinct hops. We're gonna have an application, we're gonna have an RPC client, which is gonna communicate locally with our Kaleido bridge, our local Kaleido tunnel client, which is then gonna communicate with our server client, this service that's provisioning right now. And then those payloads, those transaction calls will ultimately get proxied and sent into the Corda node that we have enumerated. Okay, so I'm gonna hop back into the dashboard for our environment, and I'm gonna check on the status of our nodes here. So I'm gonna go to node number 1, check on those logs. Okay, so we see here that it's loaded 2 core dApps, those 2 guys that we just uploaded, and it's back in its happy state. It's in the P2P messaging loop. So we'll go to node number 2, do our due diligence, make sure he's good as well. Loaded 2 core dApps, running P2P messaging loop. All right, so we're all looking good here. All right. So the last 2 things that we need to address here, we need to connect to our network bridge, and we need to download this JSON object that will allow us to communicate and know the endpoints that we need to talk to on Kaleido. Every service, every ingress in Kaleido, whether it's a node, whether it's an ancillary service, or whether it's an admin API, it has boundary security on it. So if we're talking to any nodes or any services, we need these strongly generated application credentials to have that secure TLS connection. So I'm gonna create a new pair, just call them ABC123. This is an arbitrary string. You can call your creds whatever you want. But you do need to bear the responsibility for saving the password. This works like every other cloud service where we do not persist your password. It's a salt hash verification on the server side. So you as a user, you as an operator and admin, you are responsible for storing this password right here. On this screen, we're making your life easy by exposing it, and we're even gonna embed it directly into this configuration file. So just to provide some further context before we start introducing too many different pieces into the equation right here, this is ultimately the endpoint that our local client is going to target, right? This is the WebSocket endpoint for this bridge server, this service that we just created on Kaleido. And what we're going to do is we're going to download this config file that has these username, password, application credentials embedded inline, and it's going to know all about the Corda nodes, the notary, and especially it's going to know about this service right here. Okay, and that's what's going to ultimately allow us to proxy those calls into the network via TCP. So we're going to download this config here. U0B, using that for my own memory here, and we can go and open this guy up. And what we see here is we see that we have the endpoint for that service that I just talked about right there, right? The Kaleido bridge server that we were pointing at, and then we have this username and we have this secret injected so that we have that secure connection. And then we have the relevant port mappings for our notary service for node number 1 and node number 2. And ultimately what we're going to be targeting is we're going to target the local host of this port right here. And that will map all the way back through, you know, our server tunneler right here and into the Corda node. So this is the config file that we'll pass to our local client. So you're going to go ahead and do this step, download this config object right here, and then you're going to download a binary for you to run locally. So go ahead and click download network bridge. And then based on your OS, whether you're Mac, whether you're Windows, whether you're Linux, go ahead and grab the correct tar or zip file that you need. So I already have one locally. I'm going to go ahead and skip that step for everyone. Okay, so we're almost there. Our nodes are in a good shape. They've uploaded those jar files. They're back in the P2P messaging loop. We've downloaded our bridge client. We've downloaded the configuration for the client to connect back to Kaleido. And the last thing we need to do is we need to do a username and a password for our RPC client or our RPC application on the Corda node. So go back to the dashboard right here. We can see all of the pertinent metrics and all of the activity logs of what we've done, creating app credentials, creating nodes, creating services. This is really nice for operators and admins to have full line of sight on what's happening. So we'll go back to node number 1, and finally we'll go ahead and click on this user management tab that we have here. So we're going to go ahead and create a user. And this is what our application is going to use to authenticate. And then our local bridge client is going to use those application credentials to authenticate. So this is the first hop that our app's going to use. I'm going to give it user 1. I'm going to give it an arbitrary role of transactor. And then I'm going to generate my own password. You can also let Kaleido create the entropy for you if you prefer to go that route. So click create. We'll see a notification that we have a role and that it's missing. And that makes perfect sense because we haven't created any roles here. So we need to go ahead and create that corresponding transactor role. So transactor, and I'm going to give it permissions of all. We'll give it the super user admin permissions. So good to go here. We have our Kaleido bridge server. We've uploaded our jar files. We've downloaded the binary to run locally, and we've downloaded the configuration file for our local client to connect back to Kaleido. So first thing we'll do is go into our terminal, and hopefully that's enough space for everyone to see. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to export the path. We're going to create an environment variable, tunneler config, and then we're going to give it the path to that JSON that we downloaded. U0B, I believe, was mine. Okay, and now we can go ahead and run this executable. Okay, so it's successfully connected to that Kaleido bridge server, right? This was the ID that we created for it, right here, the ID, and underneath it is the actual WebSocket endpoint that we have there. Okay, so that's successfully connected, and now we're going to go ahead and drive our application. We're going to start running that business logic. And what we're doing, if we go back to that configuration file, just to point out again, what we're going to do is we're going to target the local host instance of this port right here, and that will map back through the bridge server and into node number 1 to kick off this borrower-lender flow that we have. So back into the terminal, here's our application, here's our local client. On Kaleido is the bridge server, and then in the background is our Corda node here, okay? So we'll go ahead and first kick this off. So we're gonna execute the client, we're gonna use the issue method, we're gonna point to the endpoint that we wanna target through our local client, and then we're gonna give that username and that password. Okay, so this will initially connect into node number 1, so we can actually see the mapping that's occurring right here. Okay, this is the ID of node number 1 that we have right here. So IOE, I believe, if we go back into Kaleido, this will be the environment ID, and this will be the ID of node number 1, IOE. So we can go back into here, click the overview, and we see that this is the node ID on Kaleido. So we have all of those pertinent mappings here through the Kaleido bridge server and ultimately into our node via the TCP layer. All right, so now on our application side, it's saying, hey, who's the counterparty, who's the borrower in this IOU flow? So what we need to do is using these different IDs, these different resource strings, we need to confirm which one is node number 2. We know this guy is node number 1 because we just went and checked that. So we need to hop back into Kaleido, switch over to node number 2, and this guy is 09P. So figure out what integer maps to that. It's actually number 2 here, and tell the application that this guy is the borrower in this scenario. And this is going to go ahead and kick off the flow, and we'll see all the hops that occur. Essentially, it's 3 different signatures. Node number 1, node number 2 signs, sends it back to the notary, and then the notary is going to sign that unique transaction for each counterparty. So this should take 20-ish seconds, I would say, to fully complete for all those hops to execute. 22. It's a little under. And we can see all of the pertinent information in the logs here. We see the signed transaction, and then we can see, enumeration of the lender with the node ID, and the borrower and the node ID, and the notary as well. So pause there for questions. Again, we do have some of our protocol engineers on the call right here. So if there is a low-level technical question, you'd like some deeper information on, like I said, on the signing of the jar files, on the organizational hierarchy and PKI, or any of that tunneling that we just went through, feel free to raise your hand, or you can use the chat. And I'll actually go ahead and unmute everyone now. And if you do have something that you'd like to ask out loud, don't hesitate. And while we're waiting for questions, don't feel obligated to ask a question by any stretch. Go ahead, Nimesh. Everyone's unmuted. And it is free to go ahead and get started on Kaleido. Just go to Kaleido.io, click the Get Started button, and you can create your own account. You can follow along with this exact flow that we went through today. It shouldn't take more than 20 or 25 minutes to get you fully end to end to that happy path. The one critical thing that you need to bear in mind, obviously, is letting those nodes fully initialize and get back into those P2P messaging loops on both instances, right? On the initial instance where they're instantiating, and then on the second instance after you upload those jar files and instantiate them.
Can you hear me, Nick? Hi.
Hey.
Hello.
Ramesh.
Hey.
Hi.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. The question was, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create a consortium for different industries and leverage it to help solve common business problems which we all face in everyday life. So that consortium will be basically catering to different industries and different sectors to understand the problems and the projects which will complement and solve the problems, the common business problems. So I wanted to understand how to get started with that, because what you showed is primarily for probably one particular section, but I'm not sure if we can do this on this call, or probably if we can take it offline.
Yeah, happy to take it offline. What I tried to show at the beginning was the logical scope of a project when you're starting, where you're not going to truly have a decentralized network, but you may want to mimic out what that network might be able to look like. So using that membership resource on Kaleido, you can, I use the term mock out, but you can simulate, the ultimate participation of your network using those memberships. And you can very cheaply and very elegantly build out an MVP and a POC. And once you've hardened your business logic, once you have a very tangible use case, you can then decentralize the network, and you can start, pitching this and promoting this to your broader industry and the broader market. On Kaleido, it's incredibly easy to decentralize your network and onboard other participants. And you can even do that with governance embedded. So we have roles and permissions that you can allocate and you can rescind to different members in the network. Not everyone, needs all of those super user root admin permissions, the ability to create environments and onboard organizations. So you can temper the permissions of your consortia and the participating organizations. Happy to touch on this offline, but very, very easy to do that within the console or via our administrative APIs as well. So thanks for that question, Nimesh. Any other brave souls? There are no bad questions, and I guess I'll just add, for the last 2.5 years, we at Kaleido, we've put a ton of effort into making, the platform, very, very full stack, to have all of the tools and all of the APIs and all of the services that you need to build out these solutions. And we were Ethereum for, 2.5+ years. So Corda, for myself, speaking honestly, is still a new protocol to me. And there are certain features and I guess certain layers that, I'm not an expert at by any stretch. So it makes perfect sense for other folks to still be getting up to speed kind of on this flow and on the nuances of Corda. But hopefully, as you've seen through the demo, we've made it very, very digestible and very achievable to kind of get to that happy path and allow you to really focus your effort on your jar files and on the business logic that you need to write on chain. Okay, so again, I'll just reiterate. If you go to docs.kaleido.io, this is the documentation that you're going to want to use. Just click Quick Start Corda. We'll even walk you through creating your account, creating your business network, and then doing all of those fun things that we just went through: uploading the those jar files, restarting the nodes, creating that bridge server, creating our local tunneler client, downloading the config, downloading the RPC client, all the good stuff. This is ad nauseum documentation that I wrote that should walk you literally step by step through every single thing you need to do, with some high level notes and flags to make sure there's no gotchas that creep up on you. And again, if you just visit kaleido.io and go ahead and click the Getting Started button, it's free to go ahead and create your first account and start experimenting on Kaleido. And then, as your network needs to evolve, as you need more functionality, as you need to decentralize, we have different tiers that you can very easily graduate to, or you can contact us directly, contact me directly, and we can discuss a package or sort of different approaches for your industry or for your specific use case. So what I'll do, and please don't hesitate to reach out. We're super eager to work with, enterprises and startups alike, companies of all sizes, and really help you on this journey. I'm going to put my email into the chat super quickly, and you're more than welcome to reach out to me directly, discuss anything technically or anything commercially. And then the last thing I'll mention, oh, I sent that to all the panelists. I need to send that to all the attendees. Sorry. The last thing I'll mention is that within the product itself, there is a contact us feature. So if you go ahead and use this question mark in the bottom right, if you do have a sales inquiry, you do need product assistance, you think you found a bug, go ahead and submit a ticket, and this will map to our broader support team, and we'll have line of sight for our SMEs as well. Please don't open a Sev1. That would be my only request here. So with that, oh, I think I see one thing that came in the Q&A. If you want to active administrator course but not the transacting party, you need to create a Genesis node. No, you don't necessarily need to have a node if you just want to be the operator of the consortium, Kathy. That's actually quite an interesting question. Yeah, you can go ahead and create the business network. You're not going to have any resources, but you will have the ability to, act as that benevolent dictator, onboard, other decentralized organizations, and then just make sure that you don't extend permissions that you don't want them to have. For example, that invite organizations permission or the manage environments permission. Maybe you want to be the admin and you want to do kind of all of the environmental management and all of the onboarding of subsequent members, but you don't really want to get into the nitty gritty of running a blockchain node or submitting transactions. Yeah, you could certainly do that. That's quite interesting. So it looks like one more came in on the chat. Let me grab that. Oh, you're welcome. Okay, so with that, I'll give everyone 25 minutes back of their Wednesday. I really, really appreciate everyone attending. Do not hesitate to reach out directly to me or via the ticketing system. We're happy to discuss anything technically, anything commercially, and happy to iterate with you, on your use cases and on your projects. This was super fun for me. It's really exciting that we have Corda in the platform now, in addition to the best of breed Ethereum clients that we have. So super, super excited and really looking forward to watching this this next generation of projects come to life on Kaleido. So thank you, everyone, and hope you have a great Wednesday.